So welcome today. Welcome everyone. We are glad to be here at the downtown campus at the Burnaby at the BCIT downtown campus to celebrate diversity circles. Yay! Thank you all for coming. This is celebrating the Fair Employment Week and our recent SSHRC funding, which was we received over the summer. Today we're bringing together community to talk about gender diversity and equity as it intersects with precarious employment. I would like to bring up to start Splash, or Aaron Nelson Moody, and he's here to welcome us to the Coast Salish territory.
No, Sam and ne kun toxin y chola tinsna tina chantla chiachamas och milk pulpen queensna. Sam, when you get me? He's asked me to, yesterday, the day before yesterday, asked me to come join you. We don't often prepare words, we don't often prepare a speech for these sorts of events. We normally come and meet people and get a sense of what we need to talk about. It's very unnerving to do it that way, but we feel that it's closer to our tradition. The song I sang for you comes from a woman named Sequoia who lived down, I guess, where Stanley Park is today. And it was on my mind coming here because about, I don't know, it's been longer than 15 years, but several years ago at BCIT, we sang that song. One of our chiefs was singing that song for the Aboriginal students there when the Aboriginal Student Services building was fairly new. And someone burst in and said, hey, quit banging on the drums, we're trying to work here. And then he laughed. And he came back in and said, no, really, we're serious. Like, we're trying to do some important work here. Quit fooling around with the drums. And he said more and more offensive things as he went. And our chief just nodded and smiled, and he kept on singing. And it seemed like one of the first times we made a big stir at the school. And it's come a long way since then. I'm glad to say it's come a long way since then. I got to be part of the House Post project there, and I was very honored to work on your logo for you. Za asked me to say a few things about it. It's what we'd call tumeth, the color. And it's sort of the blood of the earth or the blood of the cedar tree. So it's a sacred color for us here in Coast Salish territory. You could say it's sort of an inner strength. It's poorly explained in Squamish and even worse translated into English. But I think it refers to the inner strength that we all have. If you see an old canoe here, there's not too many around, but they would be painted black on the outside, our canoes, the ones we take out into the sea. So we say sometimes when we go out into the world, there's this external strength that we face the world with. But it doesn't really take us anywhere unless we have that inner strength as well. And sometimes they'll refer to a male and a female aspect of ourselves. It needs to be in balance. So the inner part of the canoe is painted red. It's sort of that inner strength that gives us heart, that sustains us on those long journeys. So we talk about a balance between the two. But honestly, I was thinking more about the feminine when I thought of BCIT. I had some friends who went there years ago, and they didn't have a great experience. And I wanted to add a bit more of the female energy into BCIT with the projects I did there. So the house post is based on the kind of gift that a man would make to honor women in the community. What we call smanoth, like the great respect we have for the feminine in our culture. So the house post is based on that. That's what I wanted to hold up the house there and represent a Coast Salish contribution to the school. And we drew out some elements of that house post into your logo. And some people tell you it doesn't mean anything. Those shapes don't mean anything. And some people will tell you long stories about those shapes. There's one on the kind of the upper right there. It kind of looks like an eye. And they say sometimes we're like that center circle, and we deflect the energy around us like a rock in the stream, and we hold fast to who we are. Some people tell you it's the eye of Hachachana, like the eye of the creator, our creation. Some people will tell you it's the ripples we make in the world that spread out and interact with other people as the ripples cross each other, as if we're all pebbles being dropped into a pond. So some people say it means absolutely nothing, and some people tell you it means everything. But we wanted to draw a little bit on the elements of the house post, want to reflect back on the strong values that hold up the house of BCIT. So it was a great honor for me to do that work for you. And it was a great honor for me to come here tonight and to be a little part of the work that you're doing, the very important work that you're doing. OCM.
I'm going handheld. Good? And I'm having issues already. There we go. Thank you so much, Aaron. And if you want to learn more about the house post, the amazing house post that Aaron did, you just go to bcit.ca/housepost, and there it is. So we just wanted to thank everyone for coming, and thank you so much, Aaron, for that introduction. I'm Shannon Kelly, and my research partner, Za, kicked off the event. We're celebrating tonight being the recipients of Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada funding, but more importantly, we're celebrating all of you and your passion for diversity, your interest in diversity. So what is Diversity Circles, really briefly? This is a somewhat dry but apt title, an Indigenous model for post-secondary teachers and academic staff to utilize professional mentoring and community outreach for engaging student and community diversity. Basically, we're looking at connecting people. So the first thing is to connect through events like this, through social media, through our website, through workshops. Then we're looking to share wisdom. So the second channel is to share wisdom. And we'll be sharing wisdom Again, through events like this, through small workshops, anyone at BCIT, any group of any size can request a workshop on one of our topics. And as well, we will be creating a digital diversity map where we will put resources and connections, onto a digital map that would be freely available. We're not just sharing wisdom within our institute, but also we want to reach out to the community for subject matter expertise. So reaching out to community organizations, other groups, other institutions, teachers of K to 12, for example, anyone who's interested in the diversity conversation, which already is multifaceted and has many strands. And the third channel is mentoring. And Za will talk in a little bit more detail about mentoring, but basically we feel that peer-to-peer mentoring can benefit all of us, and we can share our wisdom with each other, and we can support each other. So those are sort of the three pillars of diversity circles. For the first 2 years of our project, we have decided to focus on Indigenous culture, gender diversity, and neurodiversity, or learning differences. That doesn't mean that those are exclusive categories. We will be talking about other aspects of diversity, obviously, but those are the three sort of focal points that drive our work at this point. And besides the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, and we're very happy to have that funding, so SSHRC, as it's called, has actually given us $150,000 over 2 years to run workshops, to create the digital diversity map, to create the connections and create the peer-to-peer mentoring program, as well as reaching out into the community and into industry for partnerships. But it's also a true partnership with our Faculty and Staff Association. So the FSA is a true partner in this endeavor. And BCIT, the institute itself, has also stepped forward to partner with us on that. So I wanted to acknowledge that. So as I said, Za's going to talk a little bit more about the Indigenous framework, which guides all of our activities, and a little bit more about mentoring.
I'll try this one out. Yeah. So thank you so much, Shannon. My full name is Za Derek Gamal Joseph. Za is actually after my uncle, Za Williams. Gamal is my grandfather, or a Ba in the Dachau language. I'm a member of Clauston Nation. I'm of mixed descent, so I do have an Irish side and First Nation side. So I do like to acknowledge both those of my background. To say a few words as well about Aaron, or Splash. His spirit name, or Indian name, is Splashing Eagle, and he is also a co-applicant of the SSHRC funding. The reason why he's, as you've seen, he's a big part of it, but he's also guiding us on our framework and acknowledgement of the Coast Salish and Indigenous peoples of the Lower Mainland here, which BCIT does reside on. So we do look at that as sort of the ground or framework of our model, is looking back to the logo that he has created, and we use that as an acknowledgement of the Coast Salish territory within our project. So I mentioned that because the model that I mentioned is a concentric circle model, and we've looked at some Anishinaabe teachings through an academic who's helped us as well. His name is Andrew Judge. But this layer looks at essentially BCIT and the identity of BCIT and the diversity model within the middle, and then we go through the layers outwards. So essentially it's a living model, so we're going through the process of that now. And the framework itself, we do start at a point, never really finishing within the circle, but we do start, and right now we're looking at the layer 1 and 2 of the framework, and really looking at the layers of faculty, staff, family. Within layer 1 itself, it's really looking at developing the shared perspective. So looking at groups such as this and coming together and really forming a shared perspective. Because if we look at our 3 circles, we really are together on a lot of these topics, right? And within such a large organization as BCIT, it becomes a bit challenging because we're all in different departments, and I'll use the word silos just to get that point across. But we do have that silo sort of mentality because we're such a large organization. Diversity circles is really a and the layers that we're going through is really meant to spotlight these areas or circles, and also support the areas and the overlapping knowledge that is within each. So when we mention layer 1 and layer 2, it really is starting to identify what is happening on campus, who are experts within these different areas, and also beginning to build mentors from each of these circles or each of these workshops that we hold. So as we move forward, that's what we'll be starting to launch in the new year, is looking at the circles and the representation of mentors within each of the circles and workshops. So this is exciting. We're also looking at aligning it a little bit with the work that's being done through the mentor organization in the United States. And that's where it's actually a national campaign or organization, and they are using it in a lot more structured format. And we've attended some of these events as well. So yeah, no, it's really exciting, and again, it's great to have you guys here, and we really are looking for feedback because we do see you as the experts in these areas alongside our team. And I don't think we've mentioned Kyla, but Kyla is an amazing part of the team as well. So it's the project manager, and you'll see Kyla and Shannon, myself, and Splash around as much as he can. He's a pretty busy guy. And then also another faculty member, Aaron Hunter. So I will stop blabbing on now, and I'll pass it on back to Shannon.
All right, thanks, Sa. So I just wanted to introduce tonight's topic, as you know, is gender diversity. And gender diversity obviously has many facets. Tonight is the first workshop that we're having on gender diversity. So tonight's event is really just to throw open the doors, start the conversation. We're not purporting to represent every single facet of gender diversity. We're wanting to start the conversation with some provocative thoughts and go from there, go forward with our project. So it's very exciting. It's meant to have, obviously, a celebratory tone, but that's not to say that we will never talk about pain or conflict. We'll never talk about sadness. Obviously, it's important to acknowledge pain, to acknowledge conflict, to acknowledge difficulty in order to move through that towards peace. So certainly sometimes we'll talk about pain and conflict, absolutely, but I really want to celebrate the courage and the insight of our speakers that are going to be coming up to share a bit of their knowledge and a bit of their experience on the topic of gender diversity. So from here, as I mentioned briefly before, we will be having small workshops. So starting in 2017, January 2017, we'll roll out workshops that any department, for example, or any group of employees whatsoever at BCIT can ask for a small workshop. And the two that we have planned right now on gender diversity are basically LGBTQ plus resources, so just to have that conversation and to provide faculty and academic staff with some resources to be able to interact with students and to interact with each other in a positive way. And the other workshop will be on underrepresented or disproportionate culture within our classrooms and within our institute. So in other words, some programs at BCIT, for example, have a very small number of women. So engineering programs, computing programs have very few women in them. So we want to have the conversation of how can we build up the positive culture to include many different gender diverse groups. So that other workshop will be on creating the positive culture in your classroom and in the halls of BCIT, so to speak, to and to partner with. There are many people at BCIT and many groups already having these conversations, and we will always strive to have those conversations together, but certainly small workshops is one way to do it, and then to move that onto the digital conversation, as I said. So the last thing, I'm going to turn the floor over to our project manager, Kyla, to tell us what to do with all the cool stuff we have on the table. So we've got like brightly colored markers and stuff that looks really interesting. I also want to say that more people RSVP'd to this event than are actually here. Therefore, there's lots of food. So I don't want people to feel chained to their chairs at any time. These are people are doing lightning speeches, like 5 to 6 minute speeches, so it's okay. You can walk over and have some food and fill your plates and have coffee. Please do not be shy about the food. Before I introduce the first speaker, I'll turn it over to Kyla to tell us what kind of doodling and stuff we get to do.
Thank you, Shannon, and welcome to everybody. A couple housekeeping things. If you haven't silenced things that make noise, please do that. And again, like Shannon said, just get up, get food. I did just ask, and washrooms, for those of you who don't know, are down the hall, left or right, depending on your choice of washrooms. And so, as Shannon said, there's lots on the table. The stuff that has a lot of text on it is probably there for you to take and read at your leisure. You don't need to consume that all now. There's writing pads for you to write, doodle, take with you. But the two things I want to draw your attention to, well, first of all, there are pens and markers, so make your preference choice. Some are pen people, some are not. These big sheets we've been using at all of our events, and we just encourage people to write on them some of the lessons you learn, maybe some of the actions you'll take, and how you're feeling. And you can just do that throughout the event. Like when something fits those categories, just throw it down on the sheet. You can share sheets with people or take your own if you're more inclined that way. And then the other thing, and this is in the hopes that we'll have time for some conversation afterwards, these sheets are kind of like, so many of you have probably done the bingo activity where you walk around and try and get people to, oh yes, have you ever eaten an apple? Yes, great, sign the box here. These are more just conversation starters for you to have with each other, particularly part of why we have name tags is to encourage you to go up to people you may not know. If you do participate in this, please put your name on it and some contact information in a legible way, and we will draw for a prize when we're back at the office as well. And that's it for me. Back to Shannon and Zah.
All right, so our first speaker in these sort of lightning panel is Trina Prince from the BCIT Student Association. Thanks, Trina. And you can go handheld or recorded.
All right, perfect. So I'm here to talk to you. Do you want me to flip this over? All right, there we go. This is me. So I'm actually with the Student Association at BCIT, and I'm their events manager there. But I'm actually here to talk to you about a different role that I've taken on at my time at BCIT. 3 years ago, I actually worked for BCIT itself, and I've recently moved over to the Student Association. But when I first started working at BCIT, I attended the Vancouver Pride Parade. And when I was there, I was watching and I saw SFU pass by and UBC, and I was so excited for BCIT to pass by. I was new to the Lower Mainland, and I really was excited to see the institution that was going to represent me, and it never came. We didn't have BCIT walk by, and I was a little disappointed. And so I went back to work actually that Monday or Tuesday, because it was a holiday weekend, and I was like, why weren't we in the parade? How can we make this happen? And my boss was actually telling me that he was on a committee that was trying to get it running, but just with everyone being so busy, they needed someone who maybe had the oomph behind to sit down with the committee and really work on it. And so that's when I joined the Pride Parade Committee at BCIT and quickly became the co-chair actually with Wendy. And when Wendy and I work together, we make things happen. So the following year, for the first time ever, outside of Evolution has been involved with the Pride Parade, but it had been a couple years since. And so for the first time ever, BCIT as a collective was involved and was in the Pride Parade, and we have been for the last 3 years. And so now that we've got that kind of going, we've got a good momentum behind it. We have staff, faculty, students involved with this Pride Parade committee. We have them partaking in the parade. We've realized that we need to expand because we keep hearing more and more that there needs to be more resources on campus. We need to have more things available for students, part of the LGBTQ community, the queer community, and I use that because our acronym is getting larger and larger, and I think it's important to acknowledge all of those pieces because not everyone fits into the LGBTQ. I digress. But So we're now creating that Pride Parade Committee will become the Pride Committee, and we're going to be putting together a wish list of things that we would like to see on all campuses at BCIT and within our community. We know that we need a safe space on our campuses. We know we want a space for students to go to. We want more resources on campus. There are some resources for them. Any students that may need to talk to someone about identity, gender, anything, we have counseling services available for all of our students. As well as, I think it's really important to acknowledge the Student Association does have advocates that are available. If there's any discrimination that they're experiencing within a classroom, we encourage them. But actually to have actual resources, someone to talk to, we definitely don't feel like we have that as strongly. So for me, I think it's important in spaces like this to bring that up and to really talk about how at BCIT we can make this inclusive, diverse space for students, staff, faculty, and everyone within our community. So for me, with the essay, we're starting to even just slowly, because I want to direct it towards what we're talking about tonight, which is gender diversity, which is so important. Even small steps that we're taking within the Student Association is before our meetings, when we're meeting with a new group, we go around and we ask people to talk about their pronouns and just to identify what pronouns they would prefer. Whenever I'm doing training with our front desk workers, and any student that comes forward, we automatically use they as a pronoun until they identify otherwise, because that way we're not making them feel like we're identifying them without actually getting their permission. So small steps can really make strides and make students feel welcome. We've actually had a number of students come up and say thank you. There's actually 2 specifically that I know off the top of my head that have actually said thank you, because now they feel more included. So I think it's starting there, and if we can definitely make the students feel welcome, then that's going to also mean that we're making our own colleagues feel welcome as well. And I think it's really important for us to work on that and really acknowledge that we don't live in a binary society. Yes, we think there's a male and there's a female and that's it, and we know that that's not the truth. And we want to be able to acknowledge everyone to identify the way that they want to, and that we accept them here at BCIT. So that's why I'm here to talk about and kind of get us the ball rolling. And so I've actually kind of become, because there's lots of questions coming forward about pride, about definitions, about how to be inclusive with students. So I really encourage anyone to actually approach me if they have any questions. If I cannot answer it, I definitely know resources that I can direct them towards. I'm not saying I'm an expert in any means, but I've seemed to become the person where questions have been coming forward, and I really appreciate that. And until we find a safe space and maybe actually have someone on campus that actually is there for the students in that capacity, I'm happy to answer those questions. So thank you very much for the FSA for having me. I love this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the speakers.
Thank you so much, Trina. Thanks for that. And yeah, definitely, I think we'll have a few minutes at the end of the event. So it was nice of Trina to offer to be the go-to person, and she's also easily contacted through the BCIT Student Association website contact list, so that's great. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Cheryl Thomas, who is a BCIT Aboriginal mentor within the Aboriginal mentoring program that ZA actually piloted and founded a few years ago. Very successful mentorship program for Aboriginal students at BCIT. And she is a student in the construction management program.
Nervous. Hi, my name is Cheryl Thomas, and I am Duncan from the Nakazi Reserve in Fort St. James. I've been asked to share my experiences with you in my employment in the trades industry, also my plans on returning to school to enhance my career opportunities. I'm currently employed as a crew leader at a fire and flood restoration company. I got my start 13 years ago through a temp agency, and after 2 weeks of temping, I got a full-time position as a content technician. Prior to my employment, I was making some healthy changes in my life with the support of my family and friends. These changes gave me opportunities for employment and build structure in my life. Working as a content technician, I was able to learn valuable skills as a worker and as a person. My job consisted of working in residential and commercial buildings. My job duties were to pack content, structure cleans, mold, and asbestos remediation. During that time, I worked alongside insureds and project managers. Gradually, I started developing new skills that took on new challenges to help me progress in becoming a content crew leader. With these skills, I needed to know more knowledge about the work I was doing, so I took some courses along the way, such as First Aid Level 1, Asbestos Abatement, Fall Protection, and Forklift, amongst many others. Taking these courses has helped me gain confidence in myself and encouraged me to move forward in my position and in my career. I've had to build and maintain a strong work ethic to help me strive to be a positive and productive and effective worker. I eventually became a crew leader and have been in this position for the last 11 years. I have established the abilities to lead large jobs and crews up to 25 people. During the floods in Calgary in 2013 and fires in Fort McMurray of 2016, I was in charge of leading strong teams to help with the cleanup and restoration of family homes and business owners. Through my experiences and knowledge I've gained through my employment, I've committed myself to go back to school at BCIT in January of 2017 to become a project manager. I've taken steps with upgrading this year with completing my English and currently doing my math. These two classes are requirements to enroll for construction operations and construction supervisor courses, which is 2 years part-time. With my determination, passion, and supports, I am confident I will fill my commitment to follow through with my goals to becoming a project manager with the courses BCIT has to offer. I am truly grateful for my family and friends for their support they have given me. I would like to thank Joseph for helping me to register for schooling and allowing me to share my experience and goals with you here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for sharing your experience of being a strong leader in your profession. We really appreciate that, and congratulations on moving forward. Oops, it's gone crazy. Now I've really messed up. I just wanted to give people 1 minute to grab some food, because I'm going to put the blinds down because really it's getting hard for the speakers to see. So just take 2 minutes to replenish your food. I'm going to put the blinds down at the back, and then we will go forward. Thanks, guys. Okay, thanks everyone. That was a great little interlude. Thanks for indulging me. I was blinded by the sun, and also I'm happy to see everyone eating more, so and chatting. And Kyla has officially cut into the diversity circle's cake, so it is now fair game. So it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Kate Duncan. Kate is a BCIT alum. She's a woodworker. She's a dynamo in the community, creating forums for sharing new design, and she'll tell you about her experience. She's got a fabulous slideshow of her work while she does that. So Kate Duncan, woodworker.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is super cool. I put together a slideshow. I don't know why. I thought I could maybe get away with less talking if there were pretty pictures. But yeah, my name is Kate Duncan. I'm a woodworker. I make sawdust for a living. I've got some pictures of sawdust and other things that get made as well. When I want to sound really fancy, I tell people I'm a furniture designer and maker. Makes everything sound much more glamorous than it actually is. The reality, though, is that every day I get up, I put on really dirty, grubby clothes, and I get in my pickup truck, and I go to work in a 5,000 square foot wood shop where I am largely surrounded by men. I work in an industry that is incredibly male-dominated. There is one exception. She's right there. That is my apprentice, Jamie. She's also BCIT alum, and she's fucking rad. She knocks my socks off. We're quite a little powerhouse in the wood shop. She also gets up every morning and puts on dirty clothes and goes to work in a wood shop full of men. Yeah, we like it. We like what we do. Unlike Jamie, who's relatively new at this, I've been at this for a long time. I've been in a male-dominated industry for what seems like forever. I took my first woodshop class when I was 12 years old in grade 7. I'm a sucker, and I took it again in grade 8, grade 9, grade 10, 11, and 12. And after high school, I went to university to become a woodshop teacher. And I taught high school woodshop all over the Lower Mainland for nearly 10 years. I taught in a prison for a while. That was kind of cool. And then I decided to go out on my own. I'm making a really long story short there, but one thing led to another, and I started my own business. And it's been awesome. All throughout my career, like I said, I've been surrounded by men, whether it be boys in a classroom or colleagues or peers, instructors, suppliers, lumber suppliers, hardware suppliers, subcontractors like metal workers or finishers. It's a lot of dudes. There's a lot of guys all over the place. I guess I can flesh out a little bit what that's like. As a woman surrounded by dudes all day, it has its own set of challenges, that's for sure. One of my biggest challenges has been access to information. So really finding information, how to do this. This is something that I love. I don't know why, it just is. How do I learn how to do it? Way back in 2009, I wrote a master's thesis on gender equity in trades training programs. I was a shop teacher, and I was really discouraged that all of my students were boys. I would get one girl show up once in a blue moon, but mostly it was boys coming through my classroom, and I didn't get it. I was like, this is such a great program. How come there's no girls in my class? And so I wrote my master's thesis on gender equity, and for my project, I interviewed girls who were really successful, who I considered successful in high school woodshop or automotive or metalwork programs. So they were in grade 11 or 12. They'd done it for a few years. They were going into these classrooms that were predominantly filled with guys, and they were kicking ass. So I interviewed them. And one thing that they said over and over and over again was that they had to change to be there. They had to make some kind of change, and they all said something different. They said they changed the way they walked, they changed the way they talked, the way they dressed, the language that they use, the change the way they laugh. I remember it like it was years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday because it kind of hit me like, oh shit, I do all those things too. And I didn't even really realize it. But here were these girls telling me all of these changes that they had to make in order to take these classes to gain the knowledge that they needed to be successful in a field that they wanted to be successful in. And I thought that that was really, really weird. I thought that that was interesting, somewhat problematic. I don't want to get into the huge can of worms that is the problems that are associated with assimilation, but I thought it was interesting that these girls felt the need to assimilate to this boy culture that they were presented with in these classrooms. I think it's something that we can be aware of when we're working with girls and women who are in programs that are predominantly male. I think it's something to be aware of that they have probably felt somewhere along the way that they've maybe needed to assimilate, that they've maybe needed to shift the way that they do things in order to be there. And I don't know if we're going to change that overnight or if that's ever going to happen. Sometimes I feel like it's never going to happen. Hopefully it will one day. But I think it's something to recognize and something that we can be aware of that is an extra challenge that girls and women face when they enroll in a classroom that's predominantly filled with guys. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's all I really had to say. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, great.
Thank you so much, Kate, and we'll just let the slides carry on while I say thank you. Great work, and thanks for that insight. I think that's a very good point, that we need to take a look at that in the classrooms and in the hallways of our institutions, the notion of assimilation and how that impacts students. So thank you for that. Now, let's see if I can get this. It worked. It really worked. So we're getting as I said, some great facets of gender diversity and how it impacts our work and our teaching and what we do for a living, our relationships with each other. It's my pleasure to introduce Xinying Hu, who's a faculty at Simon Fraser University in the Labor Studies Department. And I specifically asked Dr. Hu if she would be able to reflect on how gender diversity impacts precarious or contract workers in the post-secondary sector. So it's a real pleasure to have her. Thanks, Dr. Hu.
Thank you, Shannon, and thanks everybody for being here. In talking about the topic, and I'm also talking about my own situation. So I'm a sessional inspector as well. So my topic today is gender and precarity in post-secondary education sector. Since the 1980s, Canadian universities have been increasingly relying on instructors who do not hold full-time permanent positions. Although their titles vary from sessionals, contract, part-time, or adjunct faculty to limited-term appointments, these instructors are all precarious academic laborers. National data on part-time faculty is still rare. The Canadian Association of University Teachers, also called CAUT, made estimation based on the National Labor Force Survey of Statistics Canada. So here's the table. From this table, you can see the first line, that permanent full-time faculty, the ratio, in 1999 was about 80%. But in 2010, the ratio dropped to 65%. At the same time period, the temporary part-time increased. So the ratio increased from 6.9% to 15.2%. In different provinces, the situation may be slightly different. But as a whole, the ratio of short-term contracts to full-time tenured positions is on the rise. So I have two charts here. And I also got from the COT bulletin. So here you can see that since 1999, the number of contract staff has increased 200%. So that's compared to the 14% of increase of regular professors. Currently, the contract staff account to 33% of the teaching faculty across Canada. So in Ontario, according to a recent survey, short-term appointments increased more than 68%. That's between 2001 and 2010. Across Canada, it is estimated that over 50% of university courses currently are taught by non-full-time instructors. So that's about 1 out of every 2 undergraduates is taught by contract staff. In terms of gender difference among contract staff, contract academic laborers are disproportionately women and people from other marginalized groups, such as LGBTQ and ethno-minority groups. As a COT bulletin mentioned, queer faculty, faculty of color, and women are more reflected among the precarious workforce in comparison to the tenured workforce. And the structural discrimination, institutional racism, and homophobia have caused these inequalities. A recent survey titled Precarious contract faculty in Nova Scotia found that a majority of respondents, 57%, self-identified as female. It's worth noting that while women are overrepresented in non-full-time academic staff, the percentage of full-time women professors in Canada is still remarkably low. Only accounts for 33.9% of all female university teachers. And among 28.7% full-time professors at all ranks, only 15.1% are women. How does the rising precariousness or precarity affect academic laborers in general, women in particular? The first is income. Income is considerably low. The above-mentioned Nova Scotia survey found that 36% of respondents were living paycheck to paycheck, and that women were more likely to be economically insecure and without additional income support. Usually, contract instructors earn about $6,500 per class, which means that the wages fall below minimum wage if counted on hourly basis, considering they put like 60 to 70 hours per week into work. So depending on the faculty, the salary of professors at most Canadian universities ranges between $80,000 to $150,000 per year. But a contract instructor teaching the same 4 courses can only make $28,000. So that means contract staff can only earn 1/3 of the regular professors. What about benefits? So compared to a full-time professor, contract academics have very few benefits. They have no drug insurance, no dental insurance, no pension, no sabbaticals, and opportunities to advance, library privileges, offices, and access to grants. Low pay, lack of benefits, and no pension have a greater effect on women, especially when they are lone mothers or have partners who also earn low wages. The third is no job security. They need to apply for every single course they are able to teach every semester. And the common contract length for contract staff is only 1 semester. That means 4 months. So in every 4 months, you need to reapply. So job security in the form of tenure is something that precarious academic workers can only dream about. The first disadvantage is lack of representation, almost invisible. While most contract instructors are unionized, there is no representative on Senate or at departmental meetings, except for teaching, so they are almost invisible. The fifth disadvantage is very difficult to stay academically competitive. So lack of research funding and the professional network are the main problem. Also, there is no support from the employers to research, publish, and serve on committees like full-time faculties do. Contract academics have to rely on their own time and financial resources. This increased the difficulties for women who have family responsibilities, such as childcare, and have to live on low income. Sixth is persistent, overt, and subtle sexism in academia. Contract academics in precarious employment situations are particularly vulnerable. Teaching evaluations, also called student survey, student opinion surveys, can have devastating effect by discriminatory attitudes. Many studies have demonstrated that women consistently score lower than men in these surveys. Anonymous comment sections also reveal the extent to which female academic staff can be faced with attitudes ranging from mild disrespect and objectification to outright taunts and threats. LGBTQ women, racial difference, disability, and other forms of marginalization also take their difference, resulting in serious negative impacts on many contract academic laborers' working lives. So, in conclusion, precarious academic workers represent a cheaper and more flexible labor pool in post-secondary education sector. Women and those from other marginalized groups face even bigger challenges. The rising precarious employment within the university community is an unfortunate consequence of underfunding of the university. Now, conditions for contract faculty have improved on some campuses where the unions have been able to negotiate higher wages, benefits, and even some job security. For example, sessionals now have seniority at Simon Fraser University, and McMaster and the University of Waterloo have created full-time teaching-only positions to reduce their reliance on sessionals. But in general, there is still a long way to go in order to improve the situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hu. And as we said, there will be a few minutes certainly to mingle at the end, and I really encourage you to approach all of our speakers if you have specific questions. We will have also open mic questions at the end, but hopefully whatever's on your mind you can talk to the speakers about. I was thinking about when Dr. Hu was talking, all of the speakers tonight have referenced, coming into classrooms that might be not necessarily the most comfortable culture, and then I thought, isn't it interesting that the sessional faculty or the part-time instructors, might not have all the resources that they would prefer to have to support our diverse students. So the two do go hand in hand to a certain extent, and that's quite interesting result of the panel tonight. But I digress. I'm really happy to introduce our last speaker in this lightning round. Kenzie Woodbridge is FSA Director, a Faculty and Staff Association Director. She is a full-time permanent employee here at BCIT in Web Services, and she's going to provide her perspective on her career. Welcome, Kenzie.
Hello. Yes, I'm Kenzie. I know many of you people, but not everybody. And yes, I'm feeling a little nervous actually. But when Shannon first asked me if I wanted to speak at the event, my immediate thought was that I didn't really have anything to say. But of course, immediately that was followed by the sudden realization that yes, it is probably not a coincidence that I've been a person who has struggled with gender identity in various ways, and that I have also been a person who was precariously employed for around a decade in my 20s. There are many things that I could have spoken on about this topic, so this is not the only thing I could have said, but this, we have to rein it in. It's 5 to 7 minutes, so there you go. Anyway, for me, and I suspect for many people, the relationship between my gender or my gender identity or all of that and my precarious employment, my experience of that, is sort of complicated and subtle. So this is sort of a personal narrative. So first, I guess I should briefly explain my identification with gender diversity. I see it as happening on sort of two fronts. One is that I identify as either genderqueer or non-binary, which means that I do not experience myself as either strongly male or strongly female. My preferred pronoun is they, if you really want to see me smile, but she is always acceptable as well. Having these words for myself and feeling that I was allowed to use them is actually very recent, but that sense of myself not fitting in those ways, it has been a constant throughout the whole of my life. So my deepest wish was always just to be seen and understood as a person, with gender being treated as the irrelevancy that it really felt like to me. The other way in which I identify with this topic is also that for the last 12 years, I've been working in a part of BCIT in the IT department where women-ish people like me are a bit of a minority. I have a sub-department, it's 13 people, and there are only 3 of us who are women. And that is fine. 2 of my colleagues are here, and I like them just fine. I'm not against dudes, obviously, but, it still can be a thing where you're always sort of like trying to get those perspectives in there or trying to get that voice heard, and it can be very challenging. But anyway, back to the other part. As I said, it's a personal narrative, but it comes back around to the connection. I promise, I will connect the dots for you. So growing up without words for the gender identity that I have, I never felt right, but I also never felt totally wrong. So being identified as a girl was not strongly wrong for me the way that it is for some gender diverse people, but neither was it quite right. If others treated me badly because I was a girl, that was wrong because they were treating me badly. But if they treated me well because I was a girl, that was wrong because I wasn't quite a girl either. High school was, I am not unique in this, a complicated torture. Bullying in my school in particular was very rampant and quite brutal, and was frequently directed at those of us who transgressed gender norms one way or another, as I often did without intending to. Reporting bullying did nothing. The few times I reported, I was told to ignore the primarily male bullies so as not to invite further abuse. Spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't yet gotten this memo, that's terrible advice. Don't ever give anyone that advice. That's the wrong advice, my friends. I won't go into detail because it's not necessary, but suffice it to say that school was something I survived barely, rather than a place of learning that inspired me to think about my future. And so in grade 12, when my peers were applying for university and for scholarships and bursaries, I did none of that. After graduation, I drifted around for a couple of years, with my parents growing increasingly kind of desperate that I, make something of myself and fulfill my potential. Eventually the pressure became enough that I agreed to go to college, almost at random. It seems. I chose to do a 1-year certificate at Douglas College to become a legal office assistant. At the time, I would have said I chose it because I could already fulfill the graduation typing requirement of 60 words a minute, and because the description said that it had excellent opportunities for employment. But in retrospect, I think there's quite a bit more to that choice. My association with school was that it was an incredibly unfriendly place and that it was exhausting. So I had to choose something relatively unchallenging so that I could conserve my resources for all of the emotional work that I thought I would probably end up having to do. And now that I look back on it, and this was an insight I had today, I also think that I chose a primarily female program so that I could avoid the casual male abuse that I had experienced in high school. So it was a safe place. I graduated with excellent grades and skills and the ability to transcribe taped material at 120 words a minute. I applied for 10 jobs, I interviewed for 3, and I got an immediate offer. So the program catalog hadn't been lying about the excellent opportunities for employment, but wasn't quite as forthcoming about how poorly paid my chosen profession was. So even after the raise that came at the end of my 6-month probation, I could not expect to make more than $20,000 a year, or around $12 an hour, 40 hours per week. And I think that's no coincidence. Also, the fact that the career is incredibly female-dominated. Like, we know statistically that jobs that have primarily women in them do tend to be lower paid. And also that when women go into careers that are male-dominated, the pay comes down because as a society, we just want to pay women less no matter what they're doing. I did well at the technical skills of the job, but was several times told sort of vaguely but intensely to do a better job of dressing for the office. Generally, when I tell this story, I mention it at this part, like only briefly and as a joke. But in truth, it was one of the most stressful periods of my life, and almost entirely due to the clothing and the required conformity to gender norms. There was a constant criticism of how I chose to present myself, and this was not the first time that had happened. That had been true throughout my growing up and from my mother, who meant well, but wanted me to be able to fit in a little better. But this was the first time that the criticism was backed up with the unspoken threat of poverty, right? So like, if you can't figure this out, you don't get to have this job anymore, right? Not that it's a good job, but that's not the point. Every time I thought I'd gotten it right, I still seemed to be transgressing. Perhaps I was not wearing enough skirts or dresses, or heels, or nylons, or I didn't wear makeup, or whatever. I wore the wrong kind of jeans on Casual Friday was one criticism. So, like, I just wasn't performing femininity well enough. I admit I wasn't always necessarily willing to bend, maybe in the ways that I could have to conform. Sorry. I understand if this all seems a little bit overwrought, right? Because, like, I know it's just clothing. I'm fundamentally aware of that. But, I know that many women feel uncomfortable in the professional feminine uniform. And I think, I cannot totally explain the resistance, but I'm still trying to sort of understand it myself. But I think maybe there's a difference between seeing the uniform as being sort of fundamentally terrible. Actually, a glass of water would be the most help, thank you. Seeing the uniform as sort of fundamentally terrible and choosing to wear it anyway for a purpose, and experiencing the uniform as sort of like a fundamental lie about yourself. Thank you. I had that job for an uncomfortable and stressful 9 months before they fired me, or rather, they laid me off, although they fired me, basically, but, that's how it goes. And although it was understandably coded, the issue of how I dressed was a significant part of why I had to go. I was told I didn't fit into the office culture, and I couldn't put forward the image that they wanted in their law office. However, on the whole, that's one of the best things that ever happened, was not being in that job anymore. I had a friend who worked at BCIT, and he suggested that with my office skills and my typing speed, I should apply to be an auxiliary. So I did, and yes, BCIT was quite happy with those basic skills, and I started as a BCGU auxiliary in July of 2000. On my first day in orientation, when learning about how to look students up in Banner and, type in swastikam and get all the wacky things that you get when you do those things, I asked the question, does BCIT have a dress code for employees? And the person supervising us said, No, there is no official dress code at BCIT. Now, it might sound strange if you're not one of the people who's ever felt any particular struggle with clothing, but this statement gave me an immense and intense feeling of relief and comfort, immense safety. More than just the lack of a dress code, I also immediately recognized the benefit of being in a unionized workplace. Everything was written down, which meant that I couldn't be held to some amorphous, unachievable standard. I was working at a place where there was no official dress code, and what's more, I was unionized, which meant that not only had my pay jumped from $12 an hour to over $16 an hour, but the rules were all spelled out and clearly there for anyone to read. And if there was no official dress code, then I didn't have to worry about it anymore. So everyone would just have to accept me as I was. Now, that was incredibly important. The difficulty here, however, is the way that this also made BCIT to a certain extent a friendly and congenial trap. BCIT became the only place of safety that I felt I could really trust. Like everything moving outside of BCIT would always be this risk that I wouldn't be able to find that safety again, that I wouldn't be able to find a space where I could be comfortable just being whoever I was and dressing, neat and clean and, appropriate for work, but not to a specific gendered standard. So that one statement about the lack of a dress code sort of bought my gratitude and loyalty to BCIT. And it paid for many years the price of my acceptance over the lack of benefits and accumulating vacation and pension and job security. So I worked as an auxiliary on 3-month contract after 3-month contract after 3-month contract for 7 years. And then when I did finally become an employee, I didn't become a permanent employee, I became a temporary employee. And then when I was still a temporary employee, I went off on maternity leave, and while I was in the middle of my maternity leave, they were like, oh, hey, we have to cut a bunch of money. Tell you what, we don't want to have to go through layoffs. Layoffs are a pain. We're just going to not renew the contracts of anyone who is a temporary employee. So that meant that fundamentally I was going to be sort of laid off on my maternity leave, which I think we can all agree is not an equitable thing to do to anybody. And yeah, so there's all these risks that come with that. And it was this sense of myself as always having to make up for what I was that made it really easy for me to accept all of those problems for a very long time, to sort of just be like, hey, other people are bothered by it, other people stand up for themselves, other people, will, speak up, or they'll apply for all the jobs, or they'll do all the things. But I fundamentally just sort of couldn't, because I just had to be slavishly grateful for this small piece of comfort. So I am permanent. The union stuck up for me. I didn't get laid off. And, I have a very satisfying career that I'm very happy about. And I love it here, but I think that's sort of a part of why, when you are told you are less than for any reason, you might be more willing to accept an inequitable treatment that you still don't deserve, because nobody deserves that. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kenzie, and thank you for your courage in sharing those experiences with us. Really, really thank you. Did I mention pain and suffering earlier this evening? Thank you, for sharing with us how you followed that journey, and I'm really happy for you, because I know you're a great fighter for the union, an amazing employee in ITS. So thank you, Kenzie. So here we are, question period, open mic. Should we? No open mic. No question period. We're gonna talk to each other. Oh, there's still stuff. I got so excited. Sorry, I apologize. I got so excited. I forgot about the video. Yes.
World premiere.
We got the video.
Thank you, Shannon.
Sorry, Kyla.
No, that's why I'm here.
Exactly. That's why she's the project manager. I'm not.
thank you to everyone who spoke today and for sharing your stories and your experiences and your knowledge. I want to tie this in. So for those of you who came here because it's a Diversity Circles event, you may not know that this week is Fair Employment Week. This is the Canadian Association of University Teachers campaign to bring awareness to exactly what Dr. Hu was speaking about. And so we at BCITFSA are in the process of joining COUT, and we thought, well, we'll just go ahead of the curve and we'll jump on Fair Employment Week because it's so important to so many of our members. So I'm going to be quick. Basically, before I forget, I'm going to tell you there's a few things we'd love for you to do if you feel comfortable. We have a postcard pledge here that you can sign and drop in the box over there. We have our Hot Off the Presses newsletter, which focuses on Fair Employment Week. I brought some copies of CAUT's Hot Off the Press bulletin that are at the front and the back, focusing on precarious work. And then something that's going to go up on our website tomorrow is a series of videos. Some of our members, some of whom are here, Ted, our Director of Associate Members, and Lori, one of our instructors in PTS, yes, and there's a few others who aren't here, graciously volunteered to be videotaped and interviewed for a couple of videos about this topic. We're going to show you one tonight, and then you can go on our website tomorrow and see the series of them as well. So, here we go.
Definitely the fact that we don't have an office to bring them to can be challenging.
We're having technical problems. Do you know why? Let's see if we can adapt. Is it because the PowerPoint is still open?
Yeah, they click on Chrome. Okay, go back to the other view. Or Firefox.
Which one? Why don't we just let that do it?
Especially if definitely the fact that we don't have an office to bring them to can be challenging, especially if the students want to bring them to can be challenging, especially if the students want to have a somewhat controversial discussion about like a health issue or if they're upset about a grade or something like that. We're kind of trying to find empty classrooms or empty offices or, you know, a private part of the hallway to have these discussions in, which isn't great.
We find ourselves sitting in the hallways next to the trash cans discussing what is often personal and private matters with students. We are not provided with any office hours to do that, and I can say among our more than 20 instructors in our program that I think everyone gives a lot of themselves to meet with students outside of class, which is all essentially volunteer work.
I have to not only go and get my equipment from the AV, I also have to haul it back at the end. And that's just part of my time that I'm not compensated for.
Also for the students, it creates a little bit of a problem in that we don't technically work on our breaks between terms. So if they want to get in touch with us, we're not being paid to be here. So to be honest, we're not really here.
I recently had a student who is clearly struggling with gender identity issues, and it was something that I needed to talk to the student about so that I could show the appropriate respect to her. I couldn't attempt to speak to her about that in the class, and I had to sort of struggle to find a time and a place where I could have that kind of private conversation with her.
There's no storage that I know of that I can access after hours, which would be, say, after 9:30 or 10 o'clock at night, on weekends, or any other weeknight that I don't teach. There's no place for that. It's hard for me to find a photocopier that works or isn't already occupied.
It's just really quite endless to list all of the things that we don't get that I believe are essential to the quality of our instruction. It's not just that my life becomes harder, but what I can give to my students becomes diminished.
thank you again to the members who were interviewed. This was the world premiere of this video. So, before anything else, like I said, you can go online and see the other ones. That one focused on space and facilities. We have another one focused on job security and the question of contracts ending and having to be renewed. And then we have a general overview one. So please go on our website, bcitfsa.ca/FEW, and you can share them and send them around and send them to everyone you know so they can see them. I'm just going to pass it back to Shannon. I think in terms of Q&A, in terms of the time, I think it makes sense for folks to mingle and talk to each other and go up to speakers and talk to them if you have any questions. But I know that Shannon and Za want to close out.
Thanks so much, Kyla, and thanks again, everyone. It's really a pleasure and honor to have you here. We are mindful of the time. We do want to stop at 6 for sure. People like me, their parking will expire at 6, but that's okay. I'm not worried. Please, not at all. Please take a minute, if you have a minute to spare to, reach out to a speaker whose words meant something to you, just to say thank you, just to hug a colleague. Just take a minute. I know that we need to disperse, but if you have 1 minute to give, just take a moment to acknowledge someone. And Za, did you want to add anything? Oh, and please take some food home with you. Please, I'm begging you, take some food.
No, just thank you everyone for coming, and we'll send out more invites in the future. Get involved, and we'll show you ways to help out and get involved through the circles. So thank you so much for coming tonight, you guys.